Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our session with Progress on simplifying external data access within Salesforce. Today, we'll be focusing on a crucial topic for any organization that relies on Salesforce: how to simplify external data access without compromising security or data integrity. We know that integrating external data into Salesforce is essential for powering business processes, but often it can be a little bit tricky without the right tools. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have some actionable tips and strategies to streamline your data access and integration processes. Our speakers for today are Ross Belmont, Director of Product Management at Salesforce, Todd Wright, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Progress, and Aaron Berg, Principal Sales Engineer also at Progress. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. If we run out of time, we will be getting back to everyone individually as well. But with that, let's get started. I'll hand over to Todd.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. What really brought this webinar together at the recent Salesforce World Tour, both in London and San Francisco, the Progress DataDirect team had the chance, fortunately, to showcase our solutions for Salesforce customers within the event. And what we found is that many of the attendees were interested in learning more about the combination of Salesforce Connect and the data access capabilities from Progress DataDirect. And for today's LinkedIn Live, we are going to go over exactly that: how to take your current Salesforce investment, enhance it with Progress DataDirect. But to start off, let's learn a little bit from Ross at Salesforce about Salesforce Connect before we jump into what DataDirect is all about and how it fits in. So Ross, I'm going to pass it over to you for the first part.
All right, sounds great. Okay, wonderful. So I'll dive into the problem space that caused us to bring Salesforce Connect to market, maybe some 10 years ago now. As you probably know, if you've deployed CRM, it's great. That's all the data that's in there that's about your customers already and how they became customers and what their service issues are and what they've bought and all those types of things are in CRM, and that's lovely, but it tends not to constitute a complete picture of the customer, right? And there are many reasons why you'd want that to automate other customer-centric workflows in and around Salesforce, to present a united front, to put your best foot forward when you're engaging with your customers, right? So we see this problem frequently where there's data in CRM, but there's also important data elsewhere. And ETL and traditional data syncing techniques are pretty painful comparatively when it comes to that being a solution to getting the data into the org, right? So that is what prompted us to create and launch what we call Salesforce Connect, which, as you see here, is a data integration approach that does not copy or sync your data and has point and click setup so that you can treat that outside data as if it were effectively a custom object in Salesforce without the burden of actually having to copy it and store it within the four walls of Salesforce. So this is pretty popular for that reason, right? So in addition to the storage cost savings, there's also important security benefits. Your security teams tend to prefer data not sort of exiting, and being transmitted and copied and persisted somewhere that they're not aware of, the trust component of where that might be. So you just avoid all those hassles with Salesforce Connect. Now let's take a look at what that means and how that works, right? If you're not familiar with Salesforce Connect, I mentioned a second ago that it's almost like having a custom object for this outside data. We call it an external object, conceptually extremely similar, with the key difference that it's got pointers to reference the data in the relevant external system, be it, in this example, orders in SAP, invoices in Amazon, benefits HR data in Workday, any kind of data that might be sitting around in Snowflake. These are all valid use cases that we see, that you can imagine how this information is useful when it comes to to servicing your customers in one or more ways across channels. It's not uncommon for folks in Service Cloud, for example, to need to know very deep details about order status. That's just one very obvious use case. If this, in case this is all new to you, how many times have you had to contact some company that you bought something, you're not sure the status of your order and shipment, etc., right? Since that's not tends to be something that's naturally in CRM, it's critical that this information comes from somewhere. So to get into it in a little bit more detail, right? When this data is surfaced as an external object, we query it in real time when the user in question arrives at the screen in Salesforce that needs this data. All right. So we're not syncing it ahead of time. We're not copying it, any of that type of thing. It's loaded in the moment. Only that data that's needed for that particular UI or code element or flow to run. All right. So this gives you the picture a little bit more of how it works, because what we're doing is we're borrowing and reading in these tiny bits of data very often as your users navigate through Salesforce or use Salesforce Mobile or run flows or even Apex or reports and things like that. Those all create sort of requests to obtain data. And when that data happens to be outside, that's where Salesforce Connect comes in, wakes up, reaches out to go ahead and grab that data and feed it back into the framework that shows data throughout the rest of Salesforce and treats it like any other object, including full action capability. And this slide touches on the same concepts. Full read-write capability, which is really nice and useful in certain cases. Traditional search support, right? Flows are key. We have a lot of customers using this for flows. Obviously, your details and list views, related lists are usually a popular starting point for this capability. You can write and run Apex on this, including batch Apex, to walk over millions of records if you needed to. That's also powered by Socko and Sossel, so we can send those search requests to the other side. Again, to make the point that almost everything that's brought to bear with custom objects works with these types of external objects without the hassle of ETL syncing that data in, right? So we'll take a quick look at this, emphasizing that the setup is point and click, which is great. Especially when we have a good sense for what the data is like on the other side in the remote system. And we'll talk more about that in a second. We have a variety of different sort of protocols we support and speak relative to the popular, data sources that exist. And I'll just go to this in a table here. It's just a little easier to see the details. You are probably familiar with OData if you've heard of Salesforce Connect in the past. And the reason why I'm going to index on that for a second is because it's such a good fit for the rest of the Salesforce platform. You can sort of think of OData as a way to translate something like a SQL statement to a URL. So almost anything that you can reflect as a SQL statement can be translated to an OData request. And that's particularly great for the Salesforce platform because, as you're probably aware, the fundamental database structure underneath CRM and custom objects and everything like that is effectively a relational database concept. So that's why OData is sort of first and foremost in how we go to market with Salesforce Connect, and still represents the largest usage. Second most popular actually is custom Apex. And then we get to some of the other options here that we do support, but are just less relevant for today's discussion. And this is where our friends at Progress come in with their ability to translate something that isn't clearly on this list to OData, which we can then work with, and we can light up the rest of Salesforce from there. So this gives us a nice jumping off point to take a pause and throw it back to the folks at Progress.
Well, thank you, Ross. That was great. So as a segue to all the great things that Salesforce can offer, I'm sure there are more than likely people in the audience today where DataDirect actually fits in. And I know Ross touched on that a little bit, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper as far as that's concerned. And in my brief section today, I will discuss 5 ways DataDirect works with your Salesforce investment. And Aaron Berg, who was introduced at the beginning, will keep me honest by demoing all the capabilities afterwards. So to really kick it off, these 5 capabilities include broad connectivity, performance optimization, standards compliance, data security, and custom integrations. So the first one that I had actually mentioned was broad connectivity. DataDirect provides connectors that enable Salesforce Connect to access a wide variety of external data sources, including traditional databases, think Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, and cloud-based applications, and even APIs. And this broadens the range of systems Salesforce Connect can integrate with, from on-premises databases to software as a service platforms. In regard to performance optimization, DataDirect drivers are optimized for high-speed, real-time data access, really reducing the latency when Salesforce users query external objects. And this really helps you as a customer of Salesforce ensure that external data behaves similarly to native Salesforce data, even when sourced from complex enterprise systems. And the next thing that DataDirect complements Salesforce's standards compliance. DataDirect's connectors are built to support compliance with key data standards like OData mentioned before, which Salesforce Connect relies on to communicate with external systems. By using DataDirect, organizations can ensure compatibility with the OData protocol, which is essential for creating seamless integrations between Salesforce and other platforms. And in regard to data security, always a topic of top concern for organizations, DataDirect provides advanced security features, including encryption and secure data transfer protocols, which really enhances your Salesforce Connect's ability to handle sensitive external data securely. And this is critical for organizations with stringent data protection requirements, such as those complying with GDPR, HIPAA, and some of the privacy laws found in California. And custom integrations. Finally, with DataDirect, users can leverage custom connectors for bespoke systems or older legacy systems that we all have that Salesforce Connect doesn't natively support. This makes it easier to integrate with unique or proprietary databases that would otherwise be challenging to link with Salesforce Connect alone. And with all that said, as promised before, everything that I just mentioned, and I believe a few things that Ross had talked about as well, Aaron's now going to present via demo and see how it all works in action. Aaron, it's back to you.
Thank you, Todd and Ross. Before I hop into the demo, I just wanted to recap a few things which were discussed about Salesforce Connect in progress. We offer a product called Hybrid Data Pipeline, which lets you integrate with Salesforce Connect. As Ross mentioned, Salesforce Connect is able to reach out to OData endpoints, and Hybrid Data Pipeline can help you OData enable your data in minutes. We connect to a wide range of data sources such as SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, and even cloud sources such as Google BigQuery. In addition, we connect to REST endpoints and convert them to OData. We also have an ability to connect to multiple data sources to help save some money using our data source grouping feature. And this lets you reduce the number of endpoints that you need to subscribe to inside of Salesforce. All of this lets you create reports, dashboards, and even integrate the data directly onto, say, customer records inside of Salesforce as if the data lived there. So it makes it easy to have a single place, a single pane of glass to find all the information that you're looking for. As Ross mentioned earlier, these external objects are very similar to custom objects inside of Salesforce, except when they're called, they actually make a HTTPS call to the hybrid data pipeline in this case, which would then be making a SQL call to the database or a REST call to the appropriate REST endpoint. So other than that, they really are going to look like any other object inside of Salesforce. I'll quickly do an architecture overview of what the demo environment looks like. We'll connect to a SQL server, OData enable it, connect Salesforce to that endpoint, and we'll take a look at what that data can do for us inside of Salesforce. So here from an architecture point of view, we have a 2-node hybrid data pipeline cluster I have running in AWS, set up in a highly available configuration behind an application load balancer, and it's going to connect out to a SQL server. We also are exposing that out via OData for Salesforce using a SSL certificate over a secure HTTPS endpoint. So the SQL Server has some legacy billing data on it that we want to make available to sales account records inside of Salesforce. In this case, I've actually created a view. Hybrid Data Pipeline can connect directly to standard tables, or we can connect to views. So in this case, we're going to use a view. So I have that shown here just with some different invoice information that we think might be useful inside of the current Salesforce environment. All right, so let's go ahead and log into our hybrid data pipeline. Once we're logged in, you'll see we support a multi-tenant environment. Every user has their own data sources. When we go to data sources, you'll see we have a pretty wide range of sources that we connect to, the relational sources, cloud sources like Google BigQuery, Snowflake. We support third-party JDBC drivers, so if there's sources that you want to connect to that you may have a driver for that we don't have in the product, you can bring those along as well. So quite an extensive list of sources you can connect to. In this case, we're going to connect to a SQL Server. You'll see here connecting just as a standard 1433 connection. And if I go to my OData tab and click Edit View, we'll be able to see the schema that I've chosen for that database, and then we'll see the view that I created. We pick up the primary key automatically. We also are seeing all of the columns that are available. If you want to change the names on any of those columns, you can do that as well over here by setting up the alias for any of those columns. So with that in place, it's very easy then to take the endpoint and bring the data back. So you'll see we're making a call to hybrid data pipeline, and this data is coming directly out of that view in real time. So if we go to Salesforce now and we want to bring that data into Salesforce, we'll come over to here, we'll go into our setup in Salesforce, and we'll go to our external objects, or external data sources. And here you'll see I have a legacy account I created. And this is pointing directly to the URL of the hybrid data pipeline endpoint. We're authenticating as our hybrid data pipeline user. You don't need to store the database credentials inside of Salesforce for this. And once we have that created, we end up with these an external object called legacy accounts. So if we go to external objects here, you'll see this external legacy billing, and you'll see all of the fields that have been mapped to that remote SQL server. If we come back up, I've actually created a tab where we can take a look at that data. So if we go to our Legacy Billings tab, we can bring all of that information back here. You'll see in real time, it's coming back from this URL. So you can see all that information. And then I actually also created an indirect lookup. So we can go into an account record, and you'll see here Legacy Billings is going to pull up any related information from that remote SQL server. So we can pull up any outstanding balances or transaction information in real time. So it saves having to go and look in alternate systems, cutting and pasting account numbers. All of that information can be available to your accounts team in real time in Salesforce. And that's really what I think the beauty of Salesforce Connect with this OData solution is it lets you make these connections very quickly and really helps optimize everyone's time and not having to hunt around for the information they need, and also making sure that you're always connecting to data in real time. So if that data were to be updated or changed, it's always going to be current inside of Salesforce. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and send it back over to the team at Salesforce Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross, Todd, and Aaron, for sharing your insights today. It was great to hear a little bit more around the topic. And also thank you everyone in the audience as well for sharing your questions as well. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.